Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you for being early today here. I know it's a bit early and there are a lot of other interesting talks. So I will try to make it up for you. How many of you work or have worked with Unreal Engine? Can you raise your hands? Okay, all of you. Yeah, that's great. So let's take a look. This is the Unreal way of empowering teamwork. What I'm going to do is just present a bit on what we do, what Epic does, and what we try to build. And then we will try to build a feature inside the engine and see how everything is connected and in a way that everybody is being part of developing that feature, okay? So my name is Mario Palmero. I'm Technical Evangelist for Epic Games. I've been working with Unreal for more than 7 years now. I've been working in AAA studios, medium-sized studios, and indie studios. And also as freelancer, educator, and such. And mainly I've been a gameplay programmer and technical artist. So as I was saying, this is the first game that Epic Games did. This was interesting because it already included a scripting language that allowed the user to change the game they were playing. So this is the Unreal way of doing things. Then we built Unreal with the first Unreal engine. It included a lot of tools. For example, procedural creation of textures, a tool for procedural creation in 1998. Then we did a lot of games, and then Fortnite. And this is important because we do video games. We know how a team has to work, and Fortnite is a big game. And it doesn't only make a lot of money, but it tests our engine for us a lot. So we have a team developing a video game, a huge video game, one of the biggest video games, and we can try our engine with this game. So this is the Epic way. We try to do things. We try to do things in a proper way. We try to make cool stuff, and we want you to make cool stuff with our tools. So we want to make an impact on the industry. We want to change things, and with the highest quality possible. We're building this environment where you can develop, sustain your own creations, and publish your own creations. We're also helping developers with the Epic Mega Grants, 100 million to support in different categories: game development, not only game development, enterprise, film, education and academia, and open source and tools. We are also helping developers with Unreal Presents program. That means that we take some developers with cool projects and we create this space in big events like Nordic Games or Develop in Brighton next in a couple of weeks. And we mix them with publishers we know and we trust. So we grab studios that we trust because we always try to have a personal contact with the studios, and we keep them together. Also, Unreal Fest. I'm going to be quick over these slides, but because I think it's more interesting the other part. A lot of community events, live streams, meetups all over Europe and such. Trying to improve the engine, as you already know, you can access the source code, you can change the engine in the way you want. It's free to use until you release that. It's a 5% of royalties. As I said, because we are doing Fortnite, it's a real-life test for us. It doesn't have to play well. It has to be perfect, because we are developing it in 6 platforms concurrently. And the release it's at the same time for the 6 platforms. So we do a lot of updates to the engine because of Fortnite and because our developers. And in May was the last one, and early August will be the next one. This is, for example, some things that we added in the last one. But what I was talking about, the Unreal way of doing things and how we try to empower teamwork, we try to layer feature development. And that means that each feature that you will create, it will have several layers, and you can find easily if something is going wrong or you want to change something, you can find easily the layer where you want to change things or where you want to fix the bug. We try to improve pipelines all the time because we're doing games again. We know that it's very expensive to do video games, and we try to iterate a lot on how games are done. And we try to avoid dependencies on thirds, on plugins or whatever, because we think that the tool that we provide has to be enough to develop your games. So you are sure that you are having the right tool to do your video games, okay? So if you have a studio, you work in a team or whatever, you probably will have an idea. This is the idea of, I want to create this new feature. And then you have a lot of departments, depending on the size of your studio, but probably you have a coder at least, an artist, designer, and an animator. And everybody is going to try to make something good for that feature. And it can be a mess, or it can be a good thing. And what we try to do is to, again, layer things so each one has its own layer in this new feature that we want to create, okay? And let's see. For example, I have this idea. I want to improve the visuals and reinforce movements on an animation by doing this thing that I call rotational smear on the animation. So this is the feature we're wanting to work for the next 20 minutes, okay? So I want to implement this, and we will see how we can create this in Unreal in such a way that everybody has its place and everybody can modify, each department can modify this feature. So this is a special kind of smear because, for example, this kind of sausage that you can see here, this is from my Twitter account. It's not moving at all. So it's not doing translation. The most usual case of a smear is the translation one, that you have an object, you move it fast, and then you have those vertices like being dragged after it. Instead of that, I'm doing this on rotation, not on translation, because this object is focused on its pivot. It's on the 0, and it's not moving at all. It's just rotating. And with the usual smear effect, you wouldn't have that. You wouldn't have any vertex being dragged. So to create this effect, what are the requirements to create this effect? First of all, when you have this idea, I want to do this, you have to review your requirements. So I need an object, of course, and this object is going to have like two moments, the time 0 and time 1. So what I need to do is to drag these vertices back to the last frame, okay? But not on the translation, but on the rotation. So I need this angle. I need the angle between time 0 and time 1, okay? This is important because that's the thing that we will calculate every frame for this, to create this effect. And also, to calculate this angle, I need 2 vectors. Because to calculate the angle, I need 2 vectors. I need a pivot for the rotation and a target, an end of that vector, okay? And also, I'm not applying this effect to every vertex. I'm creating a mask on some sort. You can create masks in a lot of ways, and we will see that. But we have a mask because, as you can see here, the effect is not evenly distributed. So how everybody will participate in this feature? Let's see. So we will begin with the technical artist. The technical artist will say, okay, I know how to do that. I know how to rotate vertices in the shader. So we're going to go to the material. This is the object I want to rotate, okay? How many of you are not familiar with the editor? Can you raise your hands? What some? So this is the viewer. This is the This is the editor. This is the viewer. This is my content browser. This is the hierarchy. If you come from Unity, this is where you can find all the actors placed in the environment in this level. And here's the properties or details panel, okay? And we have an editor for every asset that we have. So I have an actor, and it has a material, and in the material, the technical artist will try to create this rotation. So we have a very basic setup. This is the material editor. We have a very basic setup. We have a base color, PBR setup, and normal maps, okay? So here, in the world position offset, I don't know if you can read from there's plenty of room here in the first line if you can read, just in case. So here, we can change the position of vertices, okay? But this is an offset, and this is going to be a tricky thing to see. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, as I said, I need a couple of parameters, okay? So yeah, I create a couple of parameters. We said that we need delta rotation. That is the amount of rotation we had in the previous frame, from the previous frame. And we also need the rotation pivot, okay? So we have these parameters for these materials. And with this, we should be able to create this effect on this sort, okay? I think for just one screen, it's too much to have separated. So what we are going to do is, first of all, I'm going to make a float from this, float 4. So we have the full quaternion. I'm going to use quaternions, okay? I prefer quaternions. I don't know why. For me, it's easier than rotators, than Euler angles, and I hope you can forgive me for that. I have my own formulas for quaternions. If I write here, I have my own function that I created for rotating a vector by a quaternion, okay? It's just this one. I grabbed it from the internet, so it's quite easy. And the only thing you have to do to have it available on your materials is to just check this out and expose to library, check it, and then you can write it down here, okay? So I already have my quaternion, but as I said, what is this vector I want to rotate? No, sorry, this is the rotator pivot. It's the other way around. Yeah, so which vector is the one I want to rotate? It's the vector that comes from the pivot point to the vertex I'm right now processing. So if I get world position, this will give me the world position of the current pivot, of the current vertex I'm processing, because this is going to happen for every vertex, for every mesh. So I only have to subtract this from this, and then what I have is the vector that goes, let's go back to the slides, the vector that goes from this pivot to this vertex, okay? So now I have this vector, and what I want is the offset to move it back towards the position I want, to the previous position. So this is the vector, but because I want an offset, I'm going to again subtract the rotated vector. Now I have that vector rotated, okay? And because I want the offset between the original position of this vertex and the new one, I just have to subtract from the calculated one, and this should be the world position offset. Okay, with a sphere, it's not easy to find it, but I'm going to put just some kind of quaternion here. I don't know how to write quaternion, just read it, the value I wanted. And the pivot point will be this position, okay? So this is all the work of the technical artist, and he is working on rotating on doing the basis on the material to rotate this vertex. But as we will see, it will get more and more complicated. So let's save, compiling shaders. It will take a while. As you can see here, this is a formula for rotational smear if you want to check it out. And as you can see, we already have the sword being rotated back to a previous frame. Okay, so it's quite easy. Okay, I know I hide something in a function, but it's the formula that you saw. So it should be fairly easy to do this. But the thing is, we want to do this in a video game, so this is not enough. I'm going to jump to the proper material. So the final material is going to look more like this one. This is a material instance. So it's going to be a bit more complicated and layered. This is what I call a smear effect. So this is the whole thing. As you can see, it's pretty similar. We're rotating by a quaternion. Here we have the quaternion, here we have the vector, absolute world position, but we have several parameters that I can work with. So this is one of the first things that we have. We are layering all the things that we can do with this material on parameters. And because we can create material instances, I can have several instances with different parameters, and this will just run fairly easily. So I'm going to drag this finished thing in this actor, and as you can see, here it is working. So what I did is we have the delta rotation, we have the rotation pivot, but I also said use back and forth deformation, so I'm not only going back to the previous frame, I'm also calculating the next one, and I'm deforming based on some kind of masks. And that's the next point. So the artist comes and I said, I did this nice mess for you to apply this feature that you wanted, but I want to be able to control this, also how this deforms and how this goes. And the artist created these masks. So we can put here any kind of mask that we want very easily, and the artist is going to be able to change not only the mesh, it's also his part or her part, but it will also be able to change mask and how this deformation happens. So if I change this texture, will change in a very different way. As you could see here, mesh deformation is happening based on this black and white Perlin noise that is on this kind of sausage again. So it's being deformed in a very different way, okay? And again, if for example, I change this because for this sword I don't want to deform in this way, I can change this, and after compiling, you will say how it deforms in a different way. It looks like a bubblegum sword. So depending on what we want to do, the artist is going to be able also to modify things. So it's not only the technical artist that created the material, also the artist is going to have its part on display. And once we have this, we go to the programmer and the designer because we want to do this real time, okay? We want this on a real character is doing real things, and we want to manipulate this regarding, as I said, on the amount that we want. And I already put this delta rod by hand and rotation pivot by hand, but that's not the way it's going to be in a real game. So let's look how we would do that. I'm going to close. I'm going to just put back this one. So here in blueprints, I have my smear weapon. Okay, I already have one created, but more or less, I will create it from scratch, so you can. I'm not sure if I have time to create it from scratch. But the thing is, yeah. So here we will create a new dynamic material instance. That means I'm going to go to the finished one because otherwise we won't have time for questions. So this is the final sort that we're going to do. For those that are not familiar with the editor, this is the editor for the blueprint. This is the event graph, and this is construction script that runs just before constructing this element. So I'm going to create a dynamic material instance. So that means that I will create one of these materials, the material I selected, but dynamic. That means that I can put a new parameter each frame, and it will change the way the material reacts. So I have the material, and on the event graph, I just have to calculate. I have this pivot, and I have this target, okay? This is the sword being deformed because the pivot point is. I'm going to change this just a moment. Smear intensity, let's put it back to 0. Compile, save. Change now, okay. So, yeah, just a second. I'm going to put this back to smear intensity 0. Yeah. So I have the pivot, I have the target, just empty components, and I have the mesh, okay? And what I'm going to do is every frame you have the event tick. That means that every tick we're going to be setting these values. The smear intensity, I had a 6 here, I think, yeah. We're going to calculate the quaternion from the previous vector. The original vector means the last vector. As you can see, at the end of each frame, I'm setting the last vector as the original vector, and with the current vector. So I'm going to calculate here this value, and this comes from. Here, this comes from the code part. Okay, so blueprints usually are used by technical designers, so this will be the area of a technical designer. So just put in some values, set vector parameter, the delta rotation that comes from this function, and the rotation pivot, again, it's just the value of this pivot component that I have. So it's quite easy, it's quite straightforward, but they have the room to change and implement their own things. So where this function get quaternion from vector to vector, because I don't have that function natively in the engine, what I did is just ask my gameplay programmer to create a library with functionality for me. And this is quite easy. It's just a line of code, say blueprint callable. That means that this function from C++ can be called from blueprint, and I am setting the inputs, the outputs, and that's okay. And as you can see, the code is pretty straightforward. It's just because I wanted to use quaternions for this example. if I would try to do this with rotators, I would be able just to do it on Blueprint. Because quaternions are not exposed on Blueprint, I need the help of a gameplay programmer, in this case, me also. But as you can see, it's quite easy to add new functionality for Blueprint for others to be able to change things. So if you have something that you can't do with Blueprints, but you want to have it in Blueprint, it's quite easy to create new Blueprint functions. So let's keep up. Yeah. So now each frame we're putting this information into this sort, and we will see how it works. If I hit play, this guy is static, but this guy, okay, no. I'm going to set up this guy, just a second. So, yeah. Smear intensity to 1, yeah. PP smear weapon, no. Blueprints, want the smear sort, okay. Save. So as you can see here, this guy, okay, this way around, this guy has already a weapon that is being modified with this information, but it's again, it's the bubblegum sword. I'm going to change it back. I'm going to put the proper mask, because otherwise my artist will be angry with me. So yeah, as you can see, it's already up and running, and it's looking great. So it gives a lot of impact to the movement, a lot of impact to the animation. We're doing some kind of AAA over this animation, but still my animator will complain. And why is that? Because my animator also wants to change this feature. It's an animation feature, so it makes sense. I want to be part of this also. So the way of doing this, for example, in Real is very straightforward. We go here, we go to the skeletal mesh, that is this mesh. We go to the anim blueprint, that is the one that controls all these animations, all the animations for this character. And well, I left a bit of the setup here, but what I'm going to do is to say when I want this effect to be applied. I don't want all the time this effect, because for example, when this guy does a slash, when it goes backwards, it also affects when it goes backward, but my animator wants only when it goes forwards. So what I'm going to do is change this animation. I'm going to add a curve, variable curves, smear intensity, okay. And now I can create curves here in this animation clip. I mean, in this animation sequence. And I will say that only when it goes from here, I'm going to add a key, 0, next frame, add a key, 1, to here. Okay, perfect. So here, add a key, 1, the key 0, almost 0. So now my animator has a way to interact with this effect also. And to do this, to read this curve, I only have to plug this in and say, I want to change the smear intensity of this. I'm going to show this in another character, so you can see how in different characters this is applied, okay? So this one is, it has a similar setup, but with some changes. And as you can see here, we have already this curve set up, okay? So the animator has already the way of changing how much this is applied. And imagine that the animator in this curve just says 0.4. This is also affecting the way. It's not only 0 or 1. He can create a gradient from 0 to 1 or whatever he wants or she wants, okay? So as you can see, these both characters apply the same effect in a very different way thanks to all the work done by animator, artists, code, and designers. Because, for example, the big guy it's creating this effect in a very different way. It has a lot of spikes, it has a different mask, and it has a different timing also. And funny thing is, I'm running out of time, but I want to also explain this. We don't have to do the masking, for example, with a texture. Unreal provides a lot of way of masking, putting information into vertices, not only with with textures. For example, I could say, let's use vertex color instead, and I can select this one. I can go to, I'm going to remove this animation asset, clear. I'm going to put him back on the T-pose. And if I go here, wall settings, modes, paint, I can start painting and I say the value of white on vertex means that it's going to be affected. The value of 0 is not going to be affected. And that will be perfect because already in my material, the technical artist set a variable to say whether if I want to use a texture or I want to use vertex color. And also, if I go to sequences, for example, my animator can do this kind of things. There's a sequence, I can add this, sorry, I'm going to go back to the regular mode, modes, details, yeah. So, Wood can say, I want to add a track on a sequencer. A sequencer is for cinematics. So imagine that on a cinematic, I want the same animation but behaving in a different way. It's just like saying, I want to add this character, a track on, and we have a smear intensity here. And why do we have a smear intensity? Why can I change the smear intensity from this track? Just because if I go to this blueprint, the smear intensity is something that I'm passing to this material every frame. And in this variable, I just click this expose to cinematics. And because it's turned on, this variable will be available from the sequencer. So I can also change the material and the effect on cinematics. So as I said, this is a lot of how we layer everything in a feature development. So if you're looking for something wrong, it's going to be easier for you to find it. And this feature, I did it by my own. It's not only meant for big teams, but also for small developers. I did everything by my own, and it was really useful to find where, because I can assure you it didn't work the first time I tried. It's very easy to find out where it was going wrong. So I think that's almost everything. Now we should have time for questions.
I read about community features, like friend list or like multiplayer matchmaking, this type of feature.
Yeah. Those are the online services. Yeah, we already have ticketing services, and there was another one. My memory right now. Yeah, this is on the service side. You have a roadmap you can check. We're working on that, but a couple of them are already released. And they're free to use, so you can use it with any other engine. Or right now we only have a SDK on C, but soon we will have an implementation for Unreal Engine. And as I said, already some features available, but you're going to have online voice chat, for example, matchmaking, authentication. You already have sentiment, for example, and a lot of analysis tools to know how your game is performing on the community. Yeah. Another question. Does that answer your question? Okay. Another.
Thank you. So I have two questions. One about audio system. I know that there has been a synth, since a few versions, but it's still experimental.
Yeah.
You know when the features will be ready. Also, it's really heavy on processor, so I can't really use it because it's really how you say, heavy.
Yeah.
And second question. Do you have some juicy features to announce?
That will be great. Not that hasn't been announced. Like we have the Chaos engine coming for the next release, probably on experimental. That's great. It's playing very well. Also, more audio content, more audio. And if it's heavy, we will probably change that because, as I said, we have Fortnite. We have to make it like perfect. It has to work on mobile. It has to work on Switch. It has to work on consoles. So if it's heavy right now, it will improve a lot until it's really usable for a final version for our game. So it doesn't make sense for us to not to do something that is performant.
Thank you for the conference.
Thank you.
We think about asking for a dev grant.
Yeah.
And can we contact you after or to have some advice?
Yeah, feel free. If you have any question on how you should do the how to apply or whatever, and what's the right amount, or whatever. I'm not on the dev grant team, and they're anonymous, of course, because otherwise they will be like stalked. But yeah, feel free, and I will try to help you in any way.
Thank you very much.
Any other question? No? We're good? Okay, thank you very much.